Darren, do you want to do us the honours, if you can, to ask them to come in? Because it's time.
Fine.
We've got a quorum and it's all systems go.
Yeah, fine.
Who's fine? Oh, for me, of course.
All right, well, we'll make a start as they're filing in. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We're about to start. Thank you very much, councillors. We do have a quorum. We just have the appointed hour. We have 3 items on our agenda, but before we proceed to that part, we'll proceed with the membership as listed. I have received an email as of this afternoon from Councillor Lawrence advising that he will be absent for this evening's planning meeting, but I haven't received any other notifications, so I'm assuming that people are just running late. But we do have a quorum. Now, disclosures of conflicts of interest on any of the items, councillors?
None from me.
All right, there being none. Can I please have, if you can, switch off your mobiles, that'd be great. Item 4, can we please have a motion to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, please?
Happy to move.
Moved by Councillor Fontana, seconded by Councillor Greco. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as part of the proceedings, we allow for speakers both in favour and against of each application that comes before us. When you get the call, I'll ask you to come forward and you'll take your position at the front desk there. The monitor will help you to guide you through the 5 minutes so you don't lose track. If in the circumstance we have multiple speakers, then in that circumstance I would ask you to divide the time in half. I note on that score 5.3 has 3 speakers in objection. If it's okay, otherwise if you can't find 1 speaker, then it'll be the division of 3 into 5 minutes, which makes it pretty awkward to say your point in about 1.30, whatever it is. So you might want to have a quiet confer before that item comes up and perhaps delegate 1 speaker from you to speak in relation to that application. But for the record, we have 3 items. But one of them relates to 5.1, 91 Gilly Street, second one 5.2, former Cray Street in Reservoir, 5.3, 1056 and 1140 and 1142 Plenty Road, Bundoora. So without further ado, 5.1, Mr. Rudd, or is it Mr. Ollis?
Yes,
welcome.
This is an application for a medium density development site known as 91 Gilly Street, Fairfield. In brief, the proposal consists of 6 dwellings constructed over 3 levels. Dwellings 1 to 5 are similar, with garaging and 3 bedrooms. The living areas are located on the 1st floor and are connected to a balcony space. Dwelling 6 is a 2-bedroom dwelling with living area on the 1st floor and balcony. That is a 2-bedroom dwelling, not a 3-bedroom dwelling. Access to the site is provided via a single access point to the north of the site. Councillors, this application was advertised in the normal fashion. Notices were placed on the site and notices were sent to adjoining owners and occupiers. And as a result of that process, 11 objections have been received to the application from residents. The objections, and these are summarised, listed on page 5 and 6 of the agenda, relate to overlooking of the kindergarten, which is located across the road, overshadowing of the kindergarten, historic buildings should be preserved, that the development is 3-storey, will set an undesirable precedent, increased parking and traffic congestion, inadequate parking provision provided on site, impact on traffic safety, excessive bulk and scale, overlooking, disruption and damage during construction, existing parking and access difficulties and illegal parking, overdevelopment, impact on neighbourhood character, inadequate landscaping, inadequate setbacks, vehicle noise, excessive site coverage, noise from dwellings, removal of asbestos, loss of community facilities, vehicle access to all, and bin location with street frontage. Councillors, their assessment of this application is that the proposal is unsatisfactory. But principally, the biggest concern relates to how this development relates to its context. To the north is a single-storey home with a traditional backyard. And what is proposed here is to retain the existing facade of the building, which occupies a large portion of the site, but then to remove the remainder of the building and construct the 6 dwellings. When referring to the first floor plan, it is evident that the balconies attached to the living areas of the building are located very close to the northern boundary with that sensitive interface. And to be exact, 1.3 metres from that boundary. So the neighbour will be presented with 6 balconies at 1.3 metres from that common boundary. Yes, the balconies will all be screened, but it's also that perception of bulk. We have the perception of being overlooked that we are concerned about as planners. Councillors, as I said, that's the principal ground, but there are several other grounds, and they're all listed on page 3 of the agenda. Councillors, we recommend that the application should be refused on those grounds. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Rolls. Now, before we proceed, just noting the late arrivals that have come, just for the purposes of acknowledging any conflicts of interest, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Walsh and Councillor Williams.
No conflicts.
No conflicts, Mr Mayor. Apologies.
All right, thank you very much. They'll be noted by our minute takers. Thank you very much. Now, I only have one objector listed, so if I can please call Mr. Paul Martin to come forward. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you, Council, for allowing me to speak. I was one of the objectors. I'm here to represent myself and my partner, who are residents and directly opposite from the proposed development. I guess the main thing that we want to say is that we're quite pleased with the recommendations that come out of the Council to not approve this proposal. And I think it's a recognition of the Council's view of the lifestyle and welfare of the people who live in the Fairfield Village. We were most pleased to see that the Council had determined that the proposals put forward didn't comply with the local planning policy, the municipal strategic statement, nor the state planning policy framework. Also, the outcomes from the neighbourhood character study, which acknowledges the village aspect of the little block of Fairfield, and that should be maintained. And it looks like the proposal didn't meet those requirements, and all of those statements that the current council put forward provide preserve that sort of sensitive area. Like yesterday, there was a street festival in Pakeman Street, which is one side of the proposed development. It had the face painting and families and children and jumping castles and palm animals and all those things that pretty much what's like within a village situation. And it was really a day that sort of expresses what the locals want, and that's sort of really important to us as residents. Also, we note that the council's planning scheme has recently been signed off by the state planning minister, and that gives more areas, more residential areas, even more protection against inappropriate development. It appears that those highlights and views in the determination of this particular example of proposal. I'd just like to thank the council for allowing us to be involved in the whole process and making an objection to the proposal understands, being able to come here and make statements and very respectful of the opinions of the residents, particularly the ones that are really close by to that particular building. We're grateful you guys have been on board with us. And we've used all those things in your deliberations.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Martin. If you may resume your position in the gallery.
Just a quick question.
No. We'll allow Mr. Martin to resume his position first. Now, Councillor McCarthy.
Just wanting to clarify something, and I appreciate Mr. Martin's comments in regard to the recommendation. My understanding, if I can through you, Mr. Mayor, is to just confirm that whilst I obviously support the recommendation of refusal, our advice, just to be clear on the record here, is that the Minister has not in fact signed off on our zones, as was, and in fact the reporting in the Leader last week is incorrect. Can we just get clarity? Because I don't want Mr. Martin to walk away from this meeting thinking that that is actually the case, when in fact our advice is that it's still not the case.
Mr. Rowe?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Martin's actually referring to Amendment C138, which is the municipal strategic statement and change of local policies. That was in fact supported by the Minister and has been approved.
Yep.
Conversely, Amendment C152, which is separate, I understand that's not what Mr. Martin's referring to, refers to the rollout of the residential zones and primarily to increase the neighbourhood residential zone on a par with Moreland and Yarra.
All right.
So I'm happy to move it.
Seconded. All right. So I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now, 5.2, 4 Macrae Street Reservoir. Is that yours, Mr. Rudd? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This application seeks approval to develop 3 double-storey dwellings. Each dwelling is proposed to have 3 bedrooms. They're also provided with 2 car parking spaces each, which is a requirement under the planning scheme. Double garage is provided for the rear unit, a single garage and tandem space is provided for the remaining 2 dwellings. The subject land is reasonably large for that part of the reservoir, 752 square metres. As a result of the planning application being advertised, there have been 5 objections received. The grounds of objections and the officer's response to the concerns raised are actually detailed on pages 28 to 29 of the officer's report. The application, you'll see in the report, councillors and Mr. Mayor, that the application has been assessed in its relevant standards. There's one area of minor non-compliance, and the reasons for that are explained on page 32 of the officer's report. Overall, the application has been assessed as having a high level of compliance with the planning scheme, and the recommendation is to issue a notice of decision subject to the conditions outlined in the officer's report.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Rudd. Now, if I can invite Ms. Paula Venter for the applicant, please. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Paula Venter and I'm here on behalf of the permit applicant. I'm just going to talk briefly about the site context and the proposed development. The site, it's a well-located site. It's within walking distance of a train station. It's 210 metres from the Newhaven train station. And it is zoned general residential to no schedule variations to res code. So it's clearly an area where council are supporting townhouse development. And it is an area where townhouse development and townhouse units exist. To the immediate north of the site, there are 3 units. To the immediate south of the site, there are 3 units. Directly opposite, there are 5 units and a flat complex. Further north on Macrae Street, there's 2 lots of 4 double-storey dwellings and a number of other multi-unit developments. So this street is emerging with townhouses. It's not a street that has a typical single dwelling on a large lot with open landscape gardens. There are a number of multi-unit sites in the immediate context of the subject site. So what we are proposing is not changing the streetscape. It's not the first application for this type of unit development in the street. It's well within the range of what already exists on the street. In terms of the merits of the application, we're proposing 3 conventional style dwellings. And what I mean by that is they're not reverse living, which are often proposed in general residential 2 zoning. So we've got living areas at ground floor, bedrooms at first floor, and private open space, north facing and at ground floor. The actual design of the dwellings has brick at ground floor and cladding above with pitched roof forms, and that's consistent with unit developments and older single dwellings in the street. The application complies with res code. We've got a wide site frontage of 24 metres and we're only proposing a single crossover. So that allows greater opportunities for landscaping in the front setback. We also don't have any front fence to the street, so that's allowing views from the street into this landscaped front setback. There's also opportunities for landscaping along the driveway and within the private open space areas at ground level. Each dwelling has private open space that meets res code, and each dwelling is provided with 2 car parking spaces, which fully meet clause 5206 of the planning scheme. There's no wall-on boundary proposed, so the development is set back from the boundaries, the northern and southern boundaries. The development to the north of the site does have wall-on boundaries, so it was an opportunity where we could maximise development and have wall-on boundary, but instead the proposal allows setbacks from the northern boundaries so that we have the opportunity to have north-facing secluded private open space to each dwelling. There's no garages, so car parking doesn't dominate the street. There's no garages to the street. The garage to dwelling 1 is set back behind the dwelling, so the front setback is just single crossover and a large area for substantial landscaping, including canopy trees. In terms of visual bulk, the first floors are well articulated. They're constructed from lightweight materials. They are recessed from the ground floors below, and importantly, they're separated from each other, so there's no continuous first floor built form across the site. The site coverage allowable is 60%, and we've proposed 38%. The permeability, which res code recommends, is 20%, and we have 34% permeability. So they're clear indicators that it's not an overdevelopment of the site and that there are opportunities for landscaping on the site. There is no significant vegetation being removed from the site, and there, as I said, there is space for vegetation within the site in the front garden, private open space areas and along the driveway. In addition, a landscape plan will be prepared as part of the condition. The council officer has done an assessment against res code and against the precinct guidelines that's in character area E7, and has considered it a reasonable development in regard to vegetation, siting, height, design detail and the front boundary treatment.
You may wish to summarise if you can.
Yep. So in summary, this is the type of application that council should be comfortable in supporting, because we're not introducing any real change to the street and we have a high level of compliance with state and local policy and res code.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Ms. Bender. You can please resume your position in the gallery. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I did have 3. I'm not sure what you've arranged, but I'll call you both, those who are going to speak, unless you've delegated one person. I have otherwise listed here before me Mr. Con Balabanis, Ms. Elizabeth Pocock, and Ms. Vicky London. So if you can please come forward. If in the circumstances that you've got, say, 1 or 2 people speaking, then 2.5 minutes will be afforded to each one. So maybe it's probably more opportune to have the speakers come forward, and in that way you can address your points.
Thank you for hearing this.
And the monitor here will help you, guide you through, so you don't lose track. Yeah.
Sorry.
And the time clock will help you too.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'm Vicky London. I actually live at number 6 Macrae Street. I actually own the 3 units there, so units 1, 2 and 3. My main concern is the drainage and the overflow that's going to affect my 3 properties. And I want to know what the developer is doing or putting in place that will stop any overflow coming in to the 3 units. We have had a flooding problem there before. It is in that sort of area, and when we had Christmas of 2011, it was pretty disastrous. So anything that's going to impact on any sort of overflow into my 3 properties, I'm very, very concerned about. As well as parking. I know they said there are 2 parks per unit, but the problem we're having now in Macrae Street is people have got their 2 cars plus their work van plus a truck. So when you try to get out of the driveway, you can't, basically. My daughter was living in Unit 3, trying to get her children to school. You cannot get out of the driveway. There's cars parked directly opposite, in front and every side. You just can't move. So that's one of the biggest issues, but my biggest issue is the drainage. And I'm very, very concerned, and I'm hoping that the developer can tell me that he's putting in some sort of retaining wall or aggie pipes or something to avoid that, or to help it getting any worse. I'll pass it over to you.
My name is Elizabeth Pocock. Good evening.
Welcome.
I moved into 5 Macrae Street in February 1990. At the time, I estimated that Macrae Street once stood 15 houses. Now I think that we have about 10 houses left and at least 28 units approaching as you turn into Macrae Street from Pringleton Road, so the southern end. If this future development is to go ahead, there will be walls on both sides. We already have the 60s or 70s block flats. We've got the double-storey dwellings, 1A Macrae Street. We've also got 4 double-storey dwellings at number 1 Macrae Street. Over on the other corner of Macrae Street and Pringleton Road, we have double-storey developments there. So, as I mentioned, when you enter from the southern end of Macrae Street, you're going to be met with almost a cutting. At the other end of Macrae Street, there's also double-storey dwellings there at number 13, I think it is. 4 double-storey dwellings have gone up there, and also on the corner of Macrae Street and Elsie Road.
You may wish to summarise your points, and then that way Mr Balabanis can take over. Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. I suppose if I can summarise it for you, you're just concentrating on the saturation of the immediate area.
That's right,
Yep.
and the car parking as well.
All right.
You can't manage even the council trucks and the rubbish bin collection and trouble trying to.
Thank you very much, Ms Pocock. You might want to resume your position in the gallery. Ms Balabanis.
Conrad Balabanis, I'm representing the block of flats at 194. We've got a serious problem with car parking in the area. Maintenance vehicles come through to do some work, can't park within the vicinity. The zoning that has changed with the trains is causing a lot of people now to not to go down the reservoir anymore, but come out to the outer stations because it's now all zone 1, and we're finding there's a saturation of people parking in the area to catch the train because there's just not enough. There's no proper car parking facilities in the area, which is actually saturating the area, and that's causing us a problem. I've had tradesmen, I've organised tradespeople to go on site who cannot access to do the works required, can't get in for tree felling or maintenance or whatever. So there are main concerns, and the second, which has already been covered, is the drainage issue in the area because there's just not enough, the water just doesn't move. We pay a premium on our insurance because it is now designated a flood zone, and that's of concern as well because there's going to be more runoff into the street instead of going in when you've got more surface area. So that's pretty much it. There are concerns.
Well, I thank you both. If you may resume your positions in the gallery. Okay. Councillors, questions? Councillor Montaro.
Yeah, question to the officers in relation to what the first objective mentioned, issues with flooding and drainage. Will the conditions on page 25, 17 to 25 address those issues or not, or that's why they're there?
Mr Rudd.
Mr Mayor, those conditions primarily affect the siding of the building. So in part code, they ensure that the proposed building is built above any 1 in 100 year flood level. In terms of the drainage capacity and capabilities of the site, there are minimum requirements, but they're addressed at the building permit stage. Council's unable to provide specific conditions that, say, address the size and capacity of drainage from the site. But I can assure the council and the objectors that that is a consideration that does occur at the building permit stage when the matter is dealt with in terms of drainage to the satisfaction of the relevant drainage authority. In terms of being able to specify a drainage regime at the planning permit stage, we're unable to do that.
All right, thank you. I saw your hand, Councillor.
Sorry, I think Councillor McCarthy was before.
You were before?
Just, I'm not familiar with this, the other dwellings in the street, and this is a very small concentration. I'm just wanting to understand the extent to which there are multi-unit dwellings in the street, because I can see here there's quite a lot in this picture. It seems to be the context, but further on beyond the street, is that the dominant form? Because it's quite a closed-in shop compared to some of the ones we receive.
Yeah, certainly what's before you is probably reflective of that particular street. There are streets nearby that don't have the amount of units, but I'd certainly agree with the observations presented to the committee from the submitters tonight, that there is certainly a number of unit developments. That's sort of outlined and touched on in the officer's report, setting the site context, which is on page 27.
And just a supplementary to that, given the answer from Mr. Rudd there, I'm assuming there's no restricted parking regime in place at the moment. I couldn't see any reference to such. And if there was to be one introduced, if this was to be approved, what would that mean? Would that mean that the dwellings on this site would have access to on-street parking permits if that was introduced?
Well, in essence, I can't really allow Mr. Rudd to answer the question because it's not related to the planning permit itself. The consequential effects can't be dealt with as part of the normal course, but I think you know the answer.
Well, I suppose whether or not there's a restricted parking regime is an answer that this bloke could answer.
I see the nod.
There's no.
There's not.
No. Okay. So, Councillor Villa.
Just on page 34, where you have the clauses 55 compliance summary. On page 34, there's the solar access to open space, and it says please see assessment in the body of this report. But I'm just wondering where it is referred to, because I've gone through it, and maybe just also elaborate a bit on that, if you may.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as I explained in the introduction, page 32, the top of, there is an explanation there, which is below the table, which is immediately follows the table on page 31.
Yep.
There's an explanation there about the solar access and the public open space, mentioning the non-compliant aspect is for only part of the open space for Unit 2, 0.18 metres,
Oh, okay.
and then Unit 3, there's a square meterage area of 1.65 square metres. It doesn't quite meet the dimensions, but it is provided to a satisfactory standard overall.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Road. I didn't connect the solar with the open space. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Lee and then Councillor Gregor.
Yes, just a quick question on page 25 regarding the conditions imposed by Melbourne Water, conditions 17 through 25 and the two notations thereafter. Would it be right to say that these will be enforced by Melbourne Water and not by us in the coming up planning stages and therefore the subsequent building stages?
Mr. Mayor, certainly the checking of the plans and the plans would need to be checked by Melbourne Water as satisfactory, and that would be a requirement to have them stamped as part of the building permit process.
Yep.
Council is equally responsible, say, if there are structures put in place, because one of the important things this tries to achieve is to ensure that there are no structures put in place that might impede the flood flow and in turn push the flood level up nearby.
Yes.
That's part of what a number of those conditions are trying to do. Council would have an equal responsibility. So if there was filling, unpermitted fill placed on the site, Council has the ability through its powers to undertake compliance action.
Thank you.
Oh, councillors, we go. Councillor Gregor, sorry.
Yeah, look, I just want to go back to the first point that was mentioned about the drainage, and I assume that the special building overlay is in relation to the drainage, is it?
Yes, it is, Mr. Mayor, and that reflects there is concern and there is validation around some of the concerns expressed about being localised flooding during high storm events.
Yeah, just a supplementary question to that. I just wanted to confirm that, but my real question is that, look, I note that the Melbourne Water's conditions have been placed as part of the permit condition if this was to get up. But I suppose my question is that if in the event, because we're seeing greater occurrences of flooding, in the event there were to be a flooding and there was to be damage to the various properties, given that council, if council was to approve this with these conditions, where does the responsibility lie?
Mr. Rudd?
Mr. Mayor, this is assessed against, and these plans are outside the planning process. So the real assessment of the drainage capacity for the site, and what this is asking for is setting a certain floor height above, and it's based on the 100-year flood level, or the height datum set by Melbourne Water. We as planners and as a responsible authority can't base things, say, on a possible maximum flood event, which they call a PMF. It would be unreasonable for council to be, or any authority to be held liable if there's a flood event to that magnitude. But certainly the conditions that are before the planning committee this evening do comply with the relevant Australian standards, and that's about the best the council as a planning authority can provide at this point in time in the approval process.
All right.
Just a further supplementary, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Well, if I get the sense, just to help us move on, if you're going to move it an alternative, you might want to reserve it for speaking in favour of the alternative.
Clarification, because it may sort of just answer my...
Because ordinarily, I've clamped it down on 2 questions, not 3.
Okay.
Yep.
So it just came from the answer. It just in relation to the flooring heights, are the flooring heights like a minimum, or can council actually propose greater than that minimum in order to safeguard against any flooding damage in the future?
Mr. Mayor, it's the discretion of the committee. We would rely on the Melbourne Water has a range of flood and drainage experts. I would be recommending we defer to the experts rather than our particular opinion as planners.
All right, thank you very much for that. Now, all right, so Councillor Fontana moves. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor McCarthy seconds. Councillor Fontana, yes.
Well, just briefly, I think it's a fairly standard 3-pack townhouse application on a 750 metre square block in Invisible. We've seen quite a few of these. I think the conditions there from page 25 onwards, 17 to 25, actually address what we can as a responsible authority deal with flooding matters. The subsequent building permit, once issued, if issued, will be dealt with by our drainage engineers to ensure that it complies with what Melbourne Water has recommended, and also to ensure that flooding doesn't occur in relation to those conditions imposed. On pages 33, 35, there's a high level of compliance on all clauses of our planning scheme, so it's pretty hard to actually knock anything back here. Look, it is regrettable that there appears to be quite a lot of identification in this area, but that's what we're going to see, and it's unlikely that if we refuse this, that VCAT will overturn a decision. We've had a few of these come to us before. It's a fairly standard, like I said before, 3-pack application on a 750 metre square block in Reza, and hence I support the officer's recommendation.
Okay, Councillor McCarthy is a seconder.
Look, I was initially in 2 minds about this. But looking at the restrictions that officers have put in place through the conditions, I think this is a better outcome than what would take place if this found its way to VCAT, and I hope it doesn't, because I don't think it actually will serve the interests of the existing residents, because you might see something bigger. I think what we've got here is actually something that's, whilst there is issues around drainage, they are Melbourne Water conditions. We don't have carriage over them. We need to respect Melbourne Water's view on this, and the enforceability will of course be at the building stage. So I think they're very strong conditions, and I can see that there's whether we like it or not, there's a very high level of compliance with Res Code, and this would almost certainly be supported at VCAT, I think, with less of the strong conditions that are in place here.
All right, Councillor Villa.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to vote against it. I think that area, I'm very familiar with that area, and it is regrettable because it's an overdevelopment precinct, not just a block, but it's a whole precinct. And I think this particular area really should be sending alarm bells, because what we have is an overdeveloped precinct, but then you have a one-off application like this particular one, which is not one of the worst, and really has to be assessed on its own merit rather than within the precinct. So, and the traffic and parking is a problem in that area, and Ruthven Station, I brought it to council, there is all this ad hoc parking going on. It is an issue. So I think the least we could do within the power of what we have in order to assess the applications is to ensure that there's total compliance, and there's non-compliance with the open space, the solar access to open space. And if we are looking at an overdeveloped precinct and you know, every little bit of open space really matters. So whilst I see that there is sufficient parking as per our per clause 55, and it doesn't, and it complies with everything else, I think we have to be absolutely vigilant with total compliance, and it doesn't meet it. And open space is very important when you're talking about secluded private space, is very important when you're talking about overdevelopment. So on that grounds, I can't support it.
All right. Thank you very much, Councillor Villada. I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? And we note the 2 against. That's been carried. Just missed one step with the previous application. So what happens from here? With respect to the refusal, the applicant has the right, at their discretion, 61 days of tonight's refusal to go to VCAT to appeal. In the circumstances, the matter just dealt with...
Sorry, can you say that again? I think we've supported the recommendation.
No, I'm just, because I missed a step with the first application. Yep, so I'm just recounting. Okay. 61 days in relation to 5.1, and now with respect to 5.2, 21 days is afforded to residents to form a view that to make themselves available of VCAT in the circumstances they wish to pursue that appeal. So, councillors, thank you very much. We are now up to our final item, which is 5.3, which is Fenty Road, Bundoora. Is that yours, Mr. Road? Please.
Mr. Mayor. I'll do an introduction. I have received an email from the applicant, which I'll place at the end of my introduction. This application seeks approval for a further amendment to a development plan. There have been a number of iterations since 2010 for the development plan for the Polaris estate, which councillors will know is been progressively developing over the past 5 years. This particular site is known as Lot 7 and backs onto the Lancaster Gate Oval. It's also next to Council's Community Centre, or close to the Council's Community Centre. And probably the reason the amendment is before you is that there's been a reconsideration of the proposed housing typology proposed by the developer. The approved development plan shows a higher concentration of apartments across the site. The proposal is to change that to a townhouse typology. And what this has done as a consequence to the development plan is it has increased the ground floor footprint. So the townhouses had a greater the apartments had a greater setback to the street and to the oval. The proposal here is to change that typology from 4-story apartments to 3-story and 2-story townhouses. And these provide a much greater occupation of the ground floor, so a reduced setback to the street, a reduced setback to the oval, sort the application for you. This is detailed quite well on page 40 of the officer's report. The officer's report also details that the application to amend the development plan has been advertised. There have been no objections received. The feedback to officers throughout the process has been fairly consistent every time notice of the Polaris development plan has been given. And that is the primary concern seems to be about security and the antisocial behaviour that happens from time to time in the heritage buildings that are left on the site. And the primary concern is to see something happen, and this particular stage before you involves the restoration of the heritage buildings, but also the development around them. And it should go a long way towards addressing some of those concerns. Now, I have received an email correspondence late this afternoon from the applicant just highlighting some concerns, and I dare say they will speak to those, so I'll provide an officer response to. And they were really concerning conditions 1 to 4. There's concern about the use of the word must and will in condition 1. Saying, Mr Mayor, that's probably not an unreasonable request. Typically at this stage in the planning process, we are dealing with a conceptual high order plan. And this condition refers to the use of medium-sized canopy trees to try and achieve that transition from the soft area of public open space to the hard built form edge. It's not an unreasonable proposition to have use of the word should or must. So I'm saying, Mr Mayor, I'm quite happy if the committee sees fit to make that change. That would be in line with the general intention of planning stand. So my apologies for that wording. There's also been concern raised regarding condition 2, but I believe there's also a planning application on foot that will address that particular concern. There's also concern about condition 3 and 4. Condition 3, the concern is about the request for an intrusion into that open space overlooking the Lancaster Gate Oval. And the reason for that condition, Mr Mayor, is to try and enable that soft edge with a canopy tree to be able to be provided. So there might be some intrusion allowed, but not to the point that would prevent or totally prevent some sort of landscape treatment. And there's a concern raised about condition 4, which reads that there's to be no fencing in the front setback. Again, my apologies, Mr Mayor, that probably should refer to a solid fence. So the intention is that in a couple of locations around the Lancaster Gate Oval, there is a hard timber fence up against the oval or set back in. The idea is to provide, or the intention of that condition is to provide that clear permeability through, and I suppose a blurring of what is the public realm to the private realm, so that there's a transition to the hard edge, the 2 or 3 story form, which is proposed before you. So I hope that explains. It's better to try and get on a common footing with the applicant at this stage, Mr Mayor, than at a later stage, because there are appeal opportunities if there is dissatisfaction in the conditions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr Rudd. So, that said, can I please now on cue call the applicant's representative, Mr James Goulding? Yep. And you two have 5 minutes at your disposal. The clock is there. That'll yep.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is James Golding. I'm from SJP Planning, and I'm the applicant or representative of the applicant, Dual Corporation. Essentially, what I've come to ask tonight is to support the proposition that's put forward in the agenda on page 38, and to also support the amendments to those 4 conditions that have been outlined in the recommendation. I'd just like to expand on those a little bit further. But before I do that, I'd just like to set a small bit of context about the site. We are talking about Lot 7 at Polaris. There's some 10 lots at Polaris. We already have a planning permit for Lot 7 Stage 1, which is plan to assist. This portion of the site here, just to give you a context, that's your existing community centre building there, and that's Lancaster Green. These are the existing dwellings which Mr Rudd spoke about just before. So we have the permit here already. We're now amending the development plan, as Mr Rudd said, to remove what was a 3-4 level apartment building from here and replace it with a number of townhouses. When we're talking about, excuse me, condition 1, we agree with the planning proposal to change the wording from should to must. We agree with the essence of the condition. We are very confident that in our application that we currently have on foot for Lot 7 Stage 2, that we can demonstrate an adequate soft transition between the townhouses and the oval. What we like is the ability to demonstrate that it's not necessarily a medium canopy tree that must be there. And part of that reason being is with Lancaster Green, as you may all recall, there's a plan for council to landscape this in the future. This is Lot 7 here. Again, some context, that is, that's the community centre, that's Lot 7 Stage 1, which we have plans for. This is Lot 7 Stage 2. Townhouses, which we're talking with the trees, are going to front this section here. And this plan, which is partially going to be funded by some of the tree amenity offsets which are generated through the development at Polaris, is looking at putting in a large indigenous planting block. So through this plan there's already going to be a lot of planting and greenery going between the oval and the development itself. So we see that we can bring forward a plan to show that. It just doesn't necessarily have to be a medium-sized canopy tree. I don't think I need to expand on condition 2 because we have comfort in the dialogue we had this afternoon with council that our application meets that requirement, or should. I agree, well, on condition 3, which is seeking setbacks at upper levels, must not encroach with balconies or other architectural features. We would like that changed, perhaps to have words at the end to retain that notation on plan, but to say if considered appropriate by council. Part of the reason being, this is a photo of the interface of the existing townhouses we have with the oval. They themselves already have architectural features and balconies, both at ground level and first floor, which go beyond their own setbacks. And we see that that condition's already been established here with what's built, but it's also been approved under the plans that we have for stage 1 that have a permit. So if we could have, if considered appropriate by council, added to that notation and retained on plan, we'd be grateful. And lastly, with no front fences, I agree with what's been put forward by Mr. Rudd. If we could have that condition amended to say no solid fences to no circuit or Century Drive, no fence in the street back, in the setback to the public open space. Again, reason being, we've already got solid fencing to the oval. Stage 1 already has approval with permeable fencing, and likewise, when we flip over to the internal road network, we have fencing there approved on stage 1, which again is quite open and permeable. It's been satisfactory there on stage 1, and we maintain that it would be satisfactory on stage 2 as well.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
You may assume your position back in the gallery. Okay, councillors, questions? I see you looking at me, Councillor Villa.
No,
Yep.
just through you, no, to you, Mr. Mayor. Also, I think there's more of a procedural question as to whether I was kind of a bit baffled because we've got the applicant recommending possible amendments. So I was just wondering whether that is appropriate. Or
in terms of us considering...
Yeah.
Well, we can ask... Hang on, Councillor Walsh. Let's do this one step at a time, please.
Yeah.
Well, I can direct that through to Ms Rudd to walk us through.
Yeah. Mr Mayor, it has happened before. We try and avoid it, but it's... Mr Golding and I haven't had a chance to sort of directly speak this afternoon. But he's highlighted some concerns in an email saying that my client's got concerns about these particular conditions. If the request is not unreasonable, I think I've got a duty to disclose that, because otherwise we could be in a dispute situation with PCAP. So I'm being open and transparent about it, saying where there are concerns and where there are not concerns.
All right.
Just supplementary to that, Mr Mayor, I'm kind of wondering whether, for procedural fairness to all applicants, and don't want to treat this particular one any different, whether it might be appropriate to defer the matter so that the officers would have appropriate time to digest and respond to some of the issues that have come up tonight from the applicant, and maybe we need to discuss this in a briefing as well.
There's only one
so
consideration.
I'm just wondering whether that's a way forward with this one.
The only thing I would point out, I think Mr Goulding mentioned that the operative consideration or scenario that we're facing, they already have a permit. Right? So this is an amendment process. So in essence, it's more a semantic consideration because it doesn't deal with the substantive consideration which was approved by the council. These are additional bits and pieces. So it's not like a die-in-the-ditch situation. So my question, I suppose, in terms of trying to interpret your question, is it inconceivable in terms of our past practice, Mr Rudd, that they could come back subsequently for retrospective approval given their minor nature?
Yes, I could, Mr Mayor. And I'm absolutely clear about the changes that have been requested.
I think that's the way to go.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think the other consideration is that given the fact that the council has approved the substantive application, that in drawing a distinction on what are additional components that were sought clarification from both sides, it can come to us at another time for approval. So if I can have a mover on that basis and a seconder, I'm happy to hear it.
I'm happy to second it.
No, just clarity, mover in relation to a deferral or a mover in relation to the recommendation?
I'm actually encouraging a move to support it.
To support it. So
to support it, and then they'll come back with retrospective consideration as a way forward because they're minor in nature, they're not substantial because they've already got a permit.
I'm happy to support a deferment.
Well,
I was going to ask because I was happy to. I was listening to the applicant. I think he made. I think he was asking what he was asking for made sense, and I feel completely comfortable with what he was asking for. So I was prepared to.
Well, we can't do that now, Councillor Walsh, because we have a mover and a seconder for deferment. So in terms of order of process, we'll put the deferment consideration first. If in the circumstances it fails, then we go back to the substantive motion that's here before us.
Can I just propose an amendment to the mover and seconder then, because I don't want us to defer with no objective, which is if the mover and seconder are happy to include the words in the deferment motion and receive advice from officers in relation to the additional proposals as put forward by the applicant.
Okay, so we'll have that noted. In fact, I might encourage you, Councillor McCarthy, to put down in writing just for the purposes of our minute takers. So, without further ado, I'm proposing to put that to the vote. All those in favour of the deferment? Against? All right. So, what a way to finish the last planning committee. Casting a vote.
Well, you can't change it.
Look, now I'm going to exercise my vote to knock back the deferment for the reasons that I outlined a couple of moments ago. So I declare the deferment motion lost.
I would like to ask a question then.
No, taking on the voice. Councillor Montano has moved, and I'll take you as the seconder. Then I'll segue to you.
I'm still not clear on whether Mr Rudd was supportive of the proposed amendments put forward by the applicant. There were a number of amendments put forward, and I'm also unclear whether those amendments are substantive or not substantive. So I would like an answer through you, Mr Mayor, to Mr Rudd about whether those proposals from the applicant are substantive, because I don't want to waste officers' time.
Well, Councillor McCarthy, if I can just preempt you there, you know that that's an inappropriate question given the fact that Mr Rudd alluded to the fact that he only received an email just this afternoon. So I think it'd be unfair to place him on the spot in terms of any preliminary assessment otherwise. And given the fact that it may well be coming back if they do increase from a position that officers decide requires retrospective approval, then you can be assured it'll be a cogent report before us rather than a verbal presentation now. So I will rule it out of order. We have a motion before us. Proposed put it. All those in favour?
Sorry?
Question.
Order of debate, Mr Mayor.
Well,
Yeah.
What's the question?
Just a question. I just wanted to get notwithstanding all the other confusion around this, but just a question in relation to page 40. It says here that there's going to be an alteration of the setbacks from 3/60 Palmer Place and 3 to 5 Sanctuary Drive, from 5 metres to 1.65 metres. I just want to understand what the implications of that will be.
Mr. Rudd?
Mr. Mayor, I explained that in my introduction, is that, put as simple as I can explain it, is that the application is largely the product of changing from an apartment typology, which has a smaller footprint, to a townhouse typology, which has a larger ground floor footprint. What that's done is to push the built form closer to the street and closer to the park at the back. So what that means is that there is less greenery surrounding it. As we've explained in the report, as reluctant as we are about that, what the application does enjoy is a lot of strategic support from the Darabin housing strategy and from the mixed-use zone itself, where it encourages an intensification of an urban form around the local centre.
All right. Supplementary? Any other questions? Otherwise,
just
Councillor Montana.
again, just getting back to the spirit of debate. So what we're essentially passing, just to clarify, is the notion to support the amendment, but with retrospective.
No.
Is that?
No.
Proposing the recommendation.
If in the circumstances we're going to have an officer assessment done in the normal process in terms of considering, because Mr. Rudd only received the late email just this afternoon, I would imagine, for instance, that if it was any import, would be brought back to the Planning Committee for its consideration, a further report, a further amendment, if you will, for us for supporting. Mr. Rudd?
Mr. Mayor, if it assists, I'm absolutely clear what would need to change in the condition.
Can you just explain that for Councillor Les?
I was more to the point through Mr. Mayor of the consequences of the further discussions between the applicant and the officers, and whether or not that's going to have any material impact on the amendment that we're going to pass.
Mr. Rudd?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'm pretty clear on what's proposed. I'm pretty clear on what is likely to be supported in the planning application that's now on board.
Now, I'll ask a further one, because this will round out everyone's concerns. If in the circumstances there is a further request that goes beyond that which you're comfortable with, I'm assuming it will be brought back to the Planning Committee.
It will, Mr. Mayor.
There you go. So, on that basis, Councillor Fontana.
Oh, look, I won't say too much. I think the officers explained it fairly clearly. There's a reduction in yield on site, and despite the fact that we do have a larger footprint, the reality is that we're actually providing livable dwellings in the form of townhouses, not the monolith of apartments, which was considered prior to that. And as it has been explained by our officer, it actually ticks off a lot of our strategies in our planning policies, our land use strategy as well. And we need to actually intensify these sort of sites, which are bad open space, and like I said before, make them livable dwellings. And what's important, what we've failed to note is zero objections. Our community actually want to see this proceed, move ahead, and more importantly, and have something happen sooner than later.
Okay, Councillor Walsh, is the seconder?
Yeah, I was going to I was considering at one stage moving an alternative to put the or can I ask for I guess an amendment to include the should and that the applicant had asked for?
No. We just explained that, Councillor Walsh. It's not appropriate. I mean, and Mr. Rudd just explained just 2 moments ago what would happen in the circumstances that is arising. So just proceed to speak to it if you can, just to finalise it. Your time is running out.
Okay, yeah, sure. Look, I think this is a good. I think this will be a good a good development, and it will be good for the good for the area. There's not too much there's not too many interface with current residents too, which is good. And one thing that is good is the old historic psychiatric hospital is going to be refurbished, and and I think that's important because of the heritage values that that has. So that's another thing that has really attracted me to this development. And I think and I would also note the work of the applicant as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Blood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to vote against the recommendation and the amendments, not because I have a problem with the way it was in its first form before the amendments, because I think overall, on balance, it was a fairly good application, although I was concerned about the lessening of the setbacks and the non-compliance. However, it's more about a procedural concern that I have, Mr Mayor. I'm not comfortable with the way in which the recommendations were proposed by the applicant. I've been on council now for 3 years. I don't recall an applicant actually proposing amendments. I was a bit uncomfortable, and the fact that it's kind of done with, we have a lot of applicants complaining that they got last minute warning about the meeting and they weren't able to respond to certain concerns or got the papers late. So I just feel that we're making concessions for this particular applicant, and I'm just not comfortable with the way it's been handled, so I can't support it.
All right, thank you, Councillor Blood. Councillor Greco.
Yeah, look, Mr Mayor, look, I really welcome, I'll be speaking against, but I really welcome the reduction in heights and the reduction in yield, and I think that a townhouse approach in this particular area is much more suited to that type of location. But again, look, I've got concerns that whilst the yields and the heights are lower, that I've got concerns in relation to what we're compromising for that, and what we are compromising for that is the various setbacks and that are associated with this proposal that don't meet our standards. Actually, they're quite substantially less than what the standards say. So, whilst we welcome something, we should not at the same time, be overly generous in the breach in the conditions. And then furthermore, Mr Mayor, is that again, I would have preferred that there would have been a deferment in relation to this particular matter, because making decisions like this, where we hear late, where things are coming late, and that we only get an opportunity to digest them here at the meeting. I don't think that's that is a good process from a governance perspective. And again, I would have liked for us to have deferred this for another 2 weeks, and so that we could get all that information, get an analysis from our officers. And I'm aware that they're fully cognizant of what that all means, but to put that down on paper, so that then it becomes a public document, and it just doesn't come, and it's not just something that's just spoken here in this room. Being mindful that people can go to the web camera and get that information, but I don't think it's explicit enough, particularly when we're dealing with these types of planning applications. So on that basis, I'm not prepared to accept the recommendation, because I feel that it should come back to us at a later date.
All right, thank you, Councillor Greco. I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? And that's carried. Thank you very much, councillors. That concludes the items on our agenda for the planning applications. Now we're up to item 6. Can I have a motion to consider moving 6.1, 2 and 3 on block? Councillor McCarthy moves. Councillor Lee seconds. Put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you very much. And can I take both yourselves, movers and seconders, to move now 6.1, 2 and 3? Thank you very much. I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. Thank you very much, guys. My last planning committee meeting is Mayor.
Well done.
Thank you. Well, that's the 25 to 7. Bravo. Thanks, mate. Yeah.